Jacobson.
Michael Jacobson.
Michael Jacobson.
Michael Jacobson.
Michael Jacobson.
Executive Director Michael Jacobson.
Michael Jacobson of the Center for Science in the Public Interest bites back.
Please welcome Michael Jacobson.
The kind of commercials shown on Saturday morning television encourage kids to eat a diet exactly opposite what the Surgeon General has recommended.
There's even a teenage ninja mutant turtle pizza. Lots of ninja, but what about nutrition? That's what bugs consumer advocate Michael Jacobson.
To see the kind of garbage that's marketed to kids. Turn on Saturday morning television and you see ads for candy, for Kool-Aid, for junky breakfast cereals, for hot dogs. Garbage.
But all of this marketing puts parents in a very unfair position. Companies are going directly to kids and saying, eat this, drink this, it's yummy, you'll love it.
A restaurant menu is a minefield, and the explosions are going to be in your stomach, your arteries, your heart.
People certainly have personal responsibility, but I'd like to hear a little bit about corporate responsibility.
Michael Jacobson heads a nonprofit health advocacy group.
How about providing nutrition information like calories up on the menu boards, using leaner meat, not using hydrogenated fats, using lower fat cheese. There's so many things industry could be doing to help consumers. Hydrogenated shortening is not vegetable oil, and the difference is measured in clogged arteries and coronary heart disease. Just having the requirement that trans fat be listed on labels will spur many food companies to make better products, to decrease the amount of trans fat. It's an important step in the right direction to help people reduce the amount of trans fat that they're getting. People should be encouraged also to eat real food. You know, fruits, vegetables, remember those? That's the good stuff that our diet should be based on. Industry has been determining how much salt is in our foods, 2 to 3 times as much salt in one meal as you should have in an entire day. And it would be funny, except it's killing over 100,000 people a year, totally unnecessarily.
I don't understand the joke.
The Center for Science in the Public Interest petitioned the FDA for a ban on 8 common food dyes and for warning labels in the meantime. Here's ABC's Lisa Stark.
Yellow 5, blue 1, blue 2.
Armed with several studies, Michael Jacobson with the Center for Science in the Public Interest wants the dyes banned.
Michael Jacobson heads the Center for Science in the Public Interest. His group has been serving up the hazards of America's menu to the media. Their most well-known warning, the report a few weeks ago on movie popcorn, and the recent reports on the health risks of Chinese and Italian restaurant food. Michael, how do you explain the triumphant success you get once you issue a report?
Your group is the Center for Science in the Public Interest, okay? You're the people who come out and say, don't eat Big Macs, popcorn is killing you, stuff like that. What science is that in science and public interest? The science of bummerology?
Well,
you know, buzz shackling?
You in the food industry might say that, but we try to get information to people, like getting nutrition labels on food packages, so people can make their own decisions if they want the 100% dose of saturated fat in a cup of...
What's wrong with saturated fat? Should my fat be unsaturated?
I was looking at some of your Americone Dream ice cream, in fact.
Oh!
Yes!
Don't trash talk Americone Dream! Don't you dare, sir! Cut off his mic, Jimmy! Cut off his mic!
Thanks to CSPI's persistence, artificial trans fat is banned from the food supply. Thank you, CSPI, for bringing healthier foods to our grocery stores, restaurants, and schools.
Happily, we've seen heart attack rates, stroke rates decline tremendously.
I support CSPI, and I hope you will too.
Thank you very much.
Michael Jacobson, thank you both.
Thank you very much, Michael Jacobson.
Michael Jacobson, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Mr. Jacobson, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My guest is Michael Jacobson. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, your master of ceremonies for the evening, Jim Hightower.
Leave it to Michael Jacobson to ruin the food at his own dinner. Well, anyway, hello, all of you Jacobson-istas. A joy to welcome you to CSP's Macapalooza and big food butt-kicking contest that we're going to have here tonight. Just makes me happier than a flea at a dog show to be looking out at all of you activists, agitators, allies as we celebrate 45 years of amazing achievements by the good Dr. Jacobson, as we congratulate Dr. Peter Lurie on his becoming CSPI's lead watchdog. And as we contemplate the good work CSPI will continue to do, now needed more than ever. I know this is a nonpartisan, non-political event, but I think maybe even the Republicans in the crowd, I think there are 3 of them, can concede that we have a government run by Goofy, Daffy, Sleepy, Sleazy, Larry, Curly, and Moe right now. So we have got to rally together to see if we can't have some common sense here. And speaking of common sense, I've known Michael since the 1970s. It almost seems like the 1870s, actually. Going back to the very start of the Center for Science in the Public Interest, back to his hirsute quasi-hippie days. And I was also in that period. And I marveled at his ability to move CSPI from a feisty little PI outfit to a feisty big PI outfit. Feistiness is what we're after here. First of all, Michael's smarter than a tree full of owls. But there are a lot of smart people here in Washington, but they don't know how to fight. And that's the beauty of CSPI and Michael in particular. They have a cleverness. My mama taught me early on that 2 wrongs don't make a right. But I soon figured out that 3 left turns do. And that's the savvy that has guided this great organization over 45 years. But his greatest strength, CSPI's greatest strength, Michael, is that he relishes the fight. He understands that battling the bastards is just about as much fun as you can have with your clothes on. For example, his little stingers to characterize the issues he's taken on. Coca-Cola and other sugary sodas were liquid candy. Artery-clogging restaurant meals like fettuccine Alfredo, heart attack on a plate. Movie theater popcorn, the Godzilla of snack foods. This sort of thing drove Coca-Cola CEOs and Frito-Lay and McDonald's, etc., crazy. Of course, that's a pretty short ride for a lot of them. But I would quickly add that Michael did not do this alone. You know, the Bible teaches us that Jacob died leaning on his staff. Michael was always able to assemble and rely on a strong staff, including many of you ex-staffers who are here tonight. Get an amen for them. CSPI has consistently taken on the lobbyists, the lawyers, and the economists of agribusiness who essentially have been running the U.S. Department of Agriculture, FDA, and other agencies for quite a few years now, not just under Donald Trump, but under a few Democrats as well. These are people who could not run a watermelon stand if we gave them the melons and had the highway patrol flag down the customers for them. But they are running the food policy of America, and that is the importance of groups like CSPI. The Center did not create the good food movement, but it has inspired it, it's informed it, it has rallied and focused it to put agriculture over agribusiness. And that's a big change, big change. And as a result, we're winning victory after victory all across the country, many of them local, over the profiteering industrializers, chemicalizers, monopolizers, and plasticizers of our food supply. I think of groups like the center in terms of a small hardware store that's near my home in Austin, Texas, and it's a great place. It's not one of these big box things. It's not quite as big as this room, in fact. But you don't have to buy the whole carton of nails. You can buy 2 nails if that's what you're after, you know. And they'll say, well, what are you trying to do? Well, I want to build a lectern. Well, let's pencil it out, they say, and see what you need. They'll loan you a tool. You can take a power saw home and bring it back. It's called Harold's Hardware, and the slogan of Harold's Hardware is, together we can do it yourself. That's got to be our slogan, doesn't it? We can't do it ourselves, but together we can do most anything. The key is perseverance. Keeping on, keeping on. We rarely win on our first time out. My friend Willie Nelson told me once that Hightower, the early bird might get the worm, but it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. You might want to pencil that out to some of the slower ones at your table. So let's hear from a few perseverers who work closely with Dr. Jacobson, Mike, this guy over here, over the years. We'll start with a champion of stick-to-itness who sponsored CSPI's menu labeling bill in 2003, sticking with it until it became law in 2010. That's the perseverance we're talking about. From her early days as a community organizer in the war on poverty. Yes, Sarah Palin, community organizers get elected to Congress. From that to her extraordinary work as the first executive director of Emily's List, and now as a true people's champion in Congress, Representative Rosa DeLauro has been and always will be a savvy, scrappy battler for America's core progressive values, economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. Rosa DeLauro.
How did I get to follow Hightower, for God's sakes? Whoa, give me a break, guys. How wonderful. Look at this great tribute here tonight. Look, this filled with love and people who have committed themselves to making sure that the food supply, that our food policy, that people are safe and are not, and have been so willing to make the fight to be able to make this happen. And I love the video, Mike, because it was, Jim made reference to his hippie days. The hair and the mustache as we went through, I don't know about the content, but there were your hippie days as we were wandering through this. And Jim, it's so great to be with you. I noticed your cowboy hat, and you and Frederica Wilson have a lot in common. So I just wanted to just say that to you. And I'm so honored to be here tonight. When Jim O'Hara called me months ago and he said, will you do this? There wasn't one bit of hesitation because of my high regard for Dr. Mike Jacobson. And I'll tell you, this is about a legacy that he has left to all of us. And I've got to tell you that if you're going to be in the fight and you want the biggest battler with you in the trenches, it's Dr. Michael Jacobson. He really is. What a force for progress. He founded the Center for Science in the Public Interest in 1971, never looked back, and he has reshaped the food industry in this country. Yes, cheer him on. Today, CSPI is our premier food safety watchdog and a leading voice for consumers at every inflection point with food, not just at the kitchen table, but at grocery stores, at movie theaters, at restaurants, and schools. And like so many people in this town, Mike first came here in 1971 for an internship with Ralph Nader. Thank goodness for the opportunity, because it brought this MIT PhD to the forefront of the fight for nutrition. CSPI put scientists, not lawyers, at the helm of an advocacy organization, a model for so many organizations that followed, but was incredibly innovative at the time. No one else was doing what they were. And the rest is history. From keeping pathogens off poultry and produce, to putting nutrition facts on packaged foods and restaurant menus, CSPI has been and will continue to be an important partner to those of us in the Congress who care deeply about food and health. And I look, he's no longer in the Congress, but I look to my pal, Tom Harkin, and I say, what a pleasure it's been working with you, Senator. No one has taken the industry to task like Michael. He has served as an example to all of us who stand up to businesses and entrenched interests in the name of health and safety. It says in the program that CSPI runs marathons and not sprints, and that could not be more accurate. Menu labeling would not have been included in the Affordable Care Act without Mike. And I will tell you, they used to refer to me as the crazy ant in the attic when I talked about menu labeling, but it is there. And we're gonna make it work, come hell or high water. And since that time, our relationship has been so important to me, and it has deepened over the years. Mike and I, working on Food Day, food label modernization, and yes, the soda tax. Yes, the soda tax. We all know that progress can be slow, but we all know the impact that these victories have on the quality of life for American families. And as I said, things take a while. You cannot get tired, especially these days, my friends. Every single day, you need to be at the top of your game in the way that Mike Jacobson has been at the top of his game every single day that he directed this effort. And after nearly a half century, Mike is passing the torch, and tonight we toast this legacy. Under Mike's leadership, CSPI virtually eliminated artificial trans fat. They removed soda and junk food from schools across the country. And introduced, quote, junk food to the vernacular. They defined organic food and ensured that American consumers had access to nutrition facts and the information that they need in order to make an informed choice about what they eat. CSPI increased government accountability and reduced foodborne illness. The impact cannot be overstated. Mike has fundamentally altered the field, and I know that the next chapter of CSPI's legacy under Dr. Peter Lurie will build upon the solid foundation that he has built. Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman in the Congress, said, she was asked about how you make progress. And she said to the reporters, "You do not make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining." Mike Jacobson has never been on the sidelines, and we are lucky to have him as the chief of the food police. A badge that some may have accepted with chagrin, but that he wore with great pride. Never on the sidelines, but standing up to fight for American families and their health and their safety. So, let me say to everyone now, I need a glass. Somebody grab me that glass of champagne. Okay, thank you. There we go. Thank you. Now I want to ask everyone to raise their glass to this remarkable man, a pioneer in food safety and a friend to all of us, to recognize Mike Jacobson, your indelible legacy and great friendship to all of us. God bless you, God love you, and happy retirement. Hear, hear.
So, onward from the halls of Congress, which will never be the same after Rosa DeLauro, thank God, and on into the hallowed halls of academe. Harvard, no less, more academe than which you cannot get. Dr. Walter Willett. This guy is among the lowest of the low in the fantasy world of Truplandia. He practices science. He's been caught frequently using facts. He's a known expert in certain fields. It's even suspected that he believes that climate change is real. So Willett is a clear and present danger to the regime of ignorance. Now consider the irony here. Jack Nicholson said that he never understood the meaning of the word irony until his mother called him a son of a bitch. So the irony is that what makes Willett a threat to those son of a bitches makes him an invaluable friend to us. Dr. Walter Willett.
Thank you. If there's anybody in the house who knows how to clone people, I want you to do it about 200 times to Representative Delora. That was fantastic. Sometimes the highest compliments come from our adversaries. When I started out as a junior faculty member in the field of nutrition, I sort of interacted a bit with people in the food industry. And I hadn't met Mike Jacobson yet, but he was referred to as sort of a pest and a nuisance. But I was thinking as I was trying to put some words on paper for tonight that I haven't heard anything like that from the food industry in the last 10 or 15 years. It's not that they're friends of Mike, but he really is someone who is respected and with help of maybe some lawsuits, feared a little bit, but he's not just a pest and a nuisance, he's somebody who makes change. For myself and our faculty members at Harvard, Mike and CSPI have been great partners. Our work has been to essentially find facts, determine the relationship between what we eat and our long-term health and well-being. We publish. And if it was just up to us, a lot of that would have just been sitting on shelves. But by working with Mike and his team, it's really been an incredible opportunity to translate what is fact and information into policy, into action for the betterment of people's lives. And Mike, it's been truly a great part of my professional career to have been able to work with you. And I think because of what you've done, millions and millions of people in the U.S. and around the world have benefited greatly. We worked together on many different projects. I can't describe them all in just a couple of minutes here, but it included Olestra. Anybody seen Olestra on the shelves recently? Trans fat, sugar-sweetened beverages, and sodium. For all of those except for sodium, where we still have a lot of work to do, we've made huge progress in these other areas. In fact, I had not even paid any attention at all or barely heard of Olestra till I heard from Mike, who sent a whole pile of documents that he and his team had dredged out of the FDA files about what Olestra did. This was not published by Procter & Gamble. It was buried deeply in there. But to us who had been working on fat-soluble vitamins, and including carotenoids, this was really scary. Just the amount in 1 ounce bag of potato chips on a daily basis could drop your blood carotenoids by about 70%. And so with Mike and our team and help of a few others, we got information out. FDA was petitioned, there was a warning label, and we kept up the drumbeat. And finally, Lester is a dead product after Procter & Gamble spent several $1 billion trying they really expected that this was going to be a main part of the U.S. food supply. Our more recent work has shown that low carotenoid levels are related to breast cancer, to dementia, and I sort of shudder to think if we had not undertaken that campaign. Of course, trans fat is more, I think, in the public arena these days, and it's about 85% gone, and would have been gone entirely next year, except for some delays Trump has managed to create. But still, I think the momentum is there, and even with those delays, the food industry knows that trans fat is also a dead issue. We've made big progress on the sugar-sweetened beverage front. Also, that's down by about 25%. And it's showing up in national statistics now. We've seen an acceleration in reduction of coronary heart disease, a real drop in risk of type 2 diabetes. Both trans fat and sugar-sweetened beverages are pretty clearly contributing to that. So how does Mike do it? It has been said before. It's putting science first. Also, it's not just that, but he's brought a strong team together and supported that team. He's really been a true leader. No one person could do what he's done, and through leadership, he's really multiplied his efforts. And third, he hasn't hesitated to take on anyone in the food industry, but it is amazing, Mike, you do it with a smile, you do it with some humor. We saw a little bit of that on the slides, and especially in today's rancorous environment, that's tremendously necessary and important as well. So it's sort of bittersweet that you're retiring. I think we need you now more than ever, but you do deserve a rest, a chance to do what you'd really like to do instead of managerial things 75% of the time. But you can be sure we're going to be knocking on your door for advice, your wisdom, your creativity. And my door is always going to be open, Mike. If you have any ideas in the middle of the night, you're welcome. And I look forward to more interactions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now let's go from academe over to the Senate chamber, where, believe it or not, we find a distinguished Solon who has not lost the common touch or his steady focus on the common good. Hard to believe in this age of money politics. You know, some elected officials come to Washington and grow in office. Others just bloat. Don't take any inference from the fact that I'm from Texas, here to refer to senators who bloat. Well, we've got now a Senator, Richard Blumenthal, who has not only grown but has flowered, spreading a progressive populist pollen that has even stiffened the backbones of some of his Democratic colleagues. Who would have thought that was possible? I thought it would take Viagra to make that happen. But I see in Blumenthal the realization that it's no longer enough for us to be progressive. We've been progressive a long time, passively progressive. We've got to become aggressive again, because the powers that be have turned radically regressive, and they're going to run roughshod over us if we don't stand up to them. So we've got to stand up and go right at those powers, and that is exactly what Senator Richard Blumenthal has been doing. Richard.
Thank you, Jim. I have never interrupted an introduction before, but I was tempted when you were going down the Viagra path. I'm happily married. We're here to talk about food, right? I agree with Professor Willett that we have never needed Mike more. I disagree with him that you deserve a rest, because we do need you more than ever. And I agree with everyone here that we're celebrating one of the giants in consumer protection, in the consumerist movement, in showing the way truly to use science in the public interest. And I want to single out somebody else here when we talk about protecting consumers and fighting for the public interest and standing strong and speaking out. No one has done it more vigorously and more effectively than my great friend Tom Harkin from Iowa. And let me tell you, Tom, we miss you in the United States Senate because we are in danger. We are in danger of regressing. I will leave early tonight to go back to the United States Senate, where we are scheduled to vote tonight in the dead of night on a measure that would roll back the rule protecting people from forced arbitration, which, as you know, has ramifications across the spectrum of protecting consumers, from finance to sexual harassment to any time there is a contractual relationship. And I hope to continue this fight with the same vigor and powerful eloquence that Michael Jacobson has done throughout his career. And his eloquence really is based on the fact that he uses facts, that he uses science, that he inspires people by speaking truth, real truth, in an age of fake facts. And so that inspiration is going to continue to be with us, continue to motivate, and give us that same power. You know, I think Michael and I have a lot in common. I understand that he celebrated Food Day. He inaugurated Food Day, similar to Earth Day, and on one occasion celebrating it by bashing in a vending machine. I didn't use violence, but I have known to say, you know, we'll bash them in court. For 20 years, I served as my state's Attorney General in Connecticut. And the Center for Science and the Public Interest was our conscience. It was our lodestar. We knew we were right when they were on our side. And we went to them constantly, and I mean constantly, when we were making decisions about whether to go to court, whether to engage other attorneys general from across the country in nutrition issues, in labeling issues, in all kinds of issues where the question was basically, how can we best protect consumers and people from special interests who sought to exploit them and cared not a whit about what the long-term consequences were. So we owe Michael a great debt of gratitude. Many of us now are able to read nutrition labels because of him. I read nutrition labels of food I will never eat. I literally, and you can ask my wife, she never goes to supermarkets because it's a couple of hours by the time she'll get me out of there. But for anybody who is curious about nutrition and food, we are now learning stuff that is vital to our health because of this man. For the curious and for the demanding, for public health, he has really been a champion and a giant, and his model of excellence will continue to inspire us. So thank you all for celebrating a remarkable and wonderful career. And being here tonight actually makes me wish I were still Attorney General. Don't tell anyone I said that now. And that it was just a few years ago when I would call Mike and say, what do you think about this? Is that the right thing to do? And when Mike said, go for it, we went for it, and others will continue to go for it because of Michael Jacobson. Thank you so much.
Don't worry, Senator, nobody here will tell on you. Moving now from the U.S. Senate to journalism. Journalism. What the hell happened to journalism? Actual investigative journalism, probing the who, what, where, when, and why of the corporate diet, which has led us and the world to everything from malnourishment to obesity. Michael Moss is one of the few who have stood out and is a model for other journalists to emulate. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Pulitzer Prize winning reporter who seems hooked on the quaint notion that journalists are supposed to be diggers, miners of truth. He's even wearing blue jeans tonight. That's his business attire. That was in the program, business attire. I got blue jeans on. He and I were the only ones got the memo here, apparently. Michael's 2013 expose, Salt, Sugar, Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us, is a classic Nader-style example of deep mining into the corporate culture. And that's what's afflicting our nation. It's not just this thing or that thing, it's a corporate culture that has taken charge of our food and of our whole nation, really. And by the way, Mr. Moss also has called Center for Science in the Public Interest, the consumer group, quote, the food industry came to fear the most. Let's ask him why. Michael Moss.
And I think they chose me to represent the journalism profession because probably I've written least about food and nutrition among other journalists in this room. But that's actually how I met Mike and know a little bit about him. So I'll give you a little insight on a journalist perspective of Mike Jacobson. I was, 10 years ago, I was actually torturing the Pentagon over the war in Iraq when my editor suggested I torture a few food companies back here in the United States. And even then, I focused on salmonella in peanuts and E. coli in, sorry, this clicker is being a little obstinate, E. coli in hamburger. When one of my best sources in the meat industry suggested to me that I actually spend a little time looking at things the food industry was intentionally adding to its products. He tested meat for E. coli for the industry, and I was a little worried he was just trying to get rid of me because he wanted me to write about salt, which got me thinking about sugar, which got me thinking about, sorry, going too fast here, which got me thinking about fat. And so I went to Mike Jacobson and sat down with him, and I said, you know, Mike, I'm thinking about spending a couple of years and writing a book about salt, sugar, fat, and I know that you're scrutinizing 5,000 additives in food. Am I going to be okay here, focusing just on those three elements? And he gets this kind of cold poker face look on his head, and it's the MIT look, and he takes his time, and I'm thinking he's thinking, how dumb is this guy? But eventually he goes, in his very succinct way, he goes, I think you're going to be okay with that. And sure enough, when I spent time in the files, there were wonderful things like this. Mike doing wonderful drawings on salt, right? And Mike dumping crates of rotten teeth on the steps of the Federal Trade Commission, right? Do I have that right? Arguing that they should regulate those Saturday morning TV shows. But Mike's greatest gift to me was when I came back to him and I said, you know, Mike, this is all really great, but have you ever met anybody, from the food industry who kind of might talk to me? And, now it gets that MIT face again, and I'm thinking, he's thinking, is this guy gonna get me sued? But no, Mike actually wouldn't think that, and in a few minutes he came up with this name, Jeffrey Dunn, who for 20 years was one of the fiercest warriors at this company. And when I was done with Jeffrey Dunn, he became Chapter 5 and walked me through the incredible history of Coca-Cola's targeting of kids at corner stores like other snack food companies with what they call the up and down the street marketing. And it's sort of Mike's ability to sort of get in the heads and communicate and talk to some giants in the food industry and understand them and win kind of their grudging respect that I think is one of the most sort of compelling things about his history. Jane had mentioned wanting to give him a gold medal, and not all of the parts of the industry sort of get Mike Jacobson. This was a Beer Institute memo that came out after CSPI issued a report on them targeting Hispanics. And I'll just try to read that front line. If they hold a publicity Olympics in Washington, Mike Jacobson and CSPI will be the shoe-in for the gold in Leap to Conclusions, an event where they have demonstrated world-class talent time and time again. It's a fantastic document, which I plumbed from my industry archives. But there is one company that really got Mike Jacobson, and for this talk I went back into my files and pulled out a gem. And that company was none other than Philip Morris. They didn't make French fries, but they had Kool-Aid and Lunchables and Capri Sun. And when CSPI issued reports and Mike Jacobson spoke, Philip Morris listened. And this is one of my favorite memos in the secret Philip Morris archives. This is a new CSPI report, as it says, disclosing scientists' links to industry. And there was no whining from Philip Morris, and by the way, these are all Philip Morris officials. They took that report and emailed around to just about every employee at the company. There was no whining, there was no pushback, there was no like nitpicking. What they said was, anybody we know, the giant of the food industry taking Mike Jacobson deadly serious, which I think is probably the greatest testament that I can think of to his power and influence on the food industry even. So thank you, Mike.
Tremendous. And that little hug there, I think, is awfully important because food is not just sustenance. It is culture. It is who we are. We just suffered a flood down in Houston, Texas, but as Kim Severson, the great writer in the New York Times, food writer about food cultures, wrote about people there within days. They were cooking not for themselves, but for their neighbors and for people who were there trying to repair things. Food is ingrained in us. It is about who we are. So now let's go to the front lines of public health protection, where Dr. Mary Bassett has spent most of her professional life fighting for the millions of people who suffer and die from the gross inequalities of the world's profit-centered corporate care system. Inequality, we hear a lot about inequality. Inequality doesn't just happen. It's deliberately caused by decisions that elites make in corporate boardrooms and government backrooms. Let's be blunt. Big tobacco, big pharma, big food, with their political enablers, rig the rules to make money by spreading bad health and bad food. As Mike was starting the center in 1971, Susan DeMarco, Susan Zeckler, and I were starting the Agribusiness Accountability Project here, which did a big study on land-grant colleges and their role in industrializing agriculture to the detriment all the constituents they were supposed to be serving. Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times was the book. And DeMarco went to interview the head of U.S. Department of Agriculture's research programs, all of their research programs. And he was very proud of these hard tomatoes that had been developed in order to be harvested by a machine that they had developed at the University of California, Davis. And he said, look, they'll lay in this bin. He had them on his desk. Said, they'll lay in this bin for 3 months. It's just wonderful. We can ship them 3,000 miles across the country. It's just a wonderful thing. And DeMarco, who's from New Jersey, said, well, you know, I grew up with these New Jersey tomatoes and the flavor that they had and everything. And we thought a lot about that. And he said, well, your children will never know the difference. That's who they are. That's what we're battling here. So let's welcome the active antidote to those cynics, the Commissioner of Health for New York City, Mary Bassett.
Well, good evening, everyone. That's the best introduction I've ever had, Jim, so thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here on behalf of 8.5 million New Yorkers to come down here to Washington, D.C. and honor Michael Jacobson. And also to welcome Peter Lorre, who I know from a previous life is up for a fight. So I joined the health department in 2002, and I was one of Tom Frieden's deputies. And one of his key advisors, one you'll probably never read about, Coke McCord, told me that I should read this book and then come talk with him about it. He said, you're going to like it. It has recipes in it. And it was called Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy by Walt Willett. He just told me that they have issued a second edition. It has even more recipes, so you may want to take a look at it. And that's how I learned about trans fat. I'd heard about saturated fat, but I'd never even heard of trans fat. And by 2006, we had introduced to the Board of Health regulations of trans fat in New York City. Lynn Silver, who's somewhere in the room, is a current board member of CSPI and was at the time the lead extraordinaire of our chronic disease work in New York's tracked down CSPI when we decided that we should work on trans fat. And that's how I learned about CSPI. But this organization had been sounding the alarm about trans fat for over a decade when we found them. And that's what Mike's done. For the last 40 years, he's been advocating for food that sustains us, keeps us healthy and safe. And CSPI has been on the forefront of food policy, raising flags about trans fat, sodium, added sugar, long before those of us in government caught on to these issues. When our city was ready to take on unhealthy foods, it was CSPI that supported us. When we called on Mike's team, they were ready. They didn't say, hey, we've been talking about this for 10 years. I mean, come on. They said, we'll come. And they supported us. They supported us in calorie labeling. They filed an amicus brief. They were vital in convincing the courts to rule in our favor in the portion cap soda wars. Mike and Margot provided legal support, and they were really helpful in helping us with those pithy sound bites for which he's so famous in countering the ABA's messaging. That's the American Beverage Association. And once again, with sodium, CSPI was a dutiful and important ally to us. So for all of our food initiatives in New York City, Mike and his team showed up, showed support, and didn't expect any recognition. All the recognition that he wanted was action. But this... So CSPI has paved the way for the innovative policies that we now take for granted. Today, when you eat dinner out in New York City, you can know that the food has been prepared with products that contain less than 0.5 grams of trans fat per serving. We have calorie posting up in our chain restaurants, and you all can know, this is how I found out, that that healthy sounding bran muffin has over 400 calories. We have continued our work with the National Sodium Reduction Initiative, and the sodium warning icons are up on menus and menu boards. Thank you, Mike. So you don't often get the confluence of forces for policy action that we had in New York City in those years. We had a fearless and hardworking health commissioner in Tom Frieden, and we had a mayor who had a peculiar fascination with public health. But the repository of knowledge that we relied on for all of our work was impeccably assembled by CSPI and made our action possible. As we enter the next chapter in this fight, we are in a very changing political environment. We in New York City will continue to push forward. Mayor Bill de Blasio, who appointed me as health commissioner, fully supports the Bloomberg public health agenda. We are already defending calorie posting. We are used to legal challenges and battles with industry. But now we have the federal government showing up in court to enter the fray on behalf of industry. So we are watching with growing concern anticipated actions by the FDA. That's why CSPI is so important. We will continue to defend New Yorkers and work with the team that you've built, Mike. So on behalf of 8.5 million New Yorkers, I want to thank you, Mike. You've made New York City and the rest of the country a healthier place. And before I stop, I don't think you had anything to do with this, but you get an A. And a letter of commendation from our mayor.
Well, matches your hair, Michael. Terrific. Thank you, Mary Bassett. What a terrific presentation there. I've got our notes here. I may steal those. Take those later. Well, now it's my happy assignment to bring up a longtime pal of mine, a co-conspirator in all things progressive that I've been involved in. This guy reminds me of a remark that was made about 100 years ago by a popular humorist, sort of a precursor to Will Rogers, actually, named Kim Hubbard, who said, every now and then an innocent man gets sent to the legislature. And that's what happened to Tom Harkin. I've known Tom and his wife, great fighters for progressive cause. He's one such man, and it is roughly, 140 years in Congress you've been serving there? Yeah. Tom has consistently taken on the bosses and the bankers and the billionaires, the big shots, the bastards and the bullshitters who are running roughshod over us. People who are knocking down the middle class, holding down poor people, and tearing down people's democratic rights in this country. But working with Michael and Center for Science in the Public Interest, Tom Harkin has been a champion of consumers, of family farmers, of workers, of Americans with disabilities, of kids, and just good food for all people. That's what America really is about, and that's what Tom Harkin is about. Tom Harkin, former senator from the state of Iowa.
great to be here this evening. My old friend Jim Hightower and old friend Mike Jacobson. Actually looking at them tonight, they've really changed in similar ways. I mean, in terms of head hair and face hair. You saw Mike Jacobson earlier, but you never saw the picture of Hightower. When I first met him, he had hair to his shoulders and a big black beard. And he'd just written a book called Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times, which I thought, I got to get to know this guy, because he was on the right path. That was before he ran for railroad commissioner. He shaved his beard off and cut his hair then, of course. But anyway, I've been with Jim so many times, and I got to tell you, I love being with Hightower because you always pick up a quote. Some of the stuff I heard tonight, I've heard before. We've been on the podium together many years. But I got a new one tonight, the irony one. Now that I'm no longer in elective office, I can use it. But I just gave a speech Saturday night, Sioux City, and I used your quote. I always attribute it. I give proper attribution, Jim. And I was talking about how the moneyed interests have taken over everything and stuff. So a lot of what Jim has talked about. And I said, to quote my old friend Jim Hightower, money is like manure. Anybody that's been on a farm knows that if you pile manure in one spot, it kills everything beneath it. But if you take that pile of manure and spread it around, it makes things grow. So I'm still using that. I think you came up with that about 40 years ago. I'm still using it. But it's a privilege to be here with such longtime friends. My gosh, Rosa, Delora, how I miss you. My. So many friends, healthy food advocates. To thank Mike for his first 46 years of sounding a very clear and certain trumpet on healthy food and leading an ever-increasing army of mostly young advocates to challenge and change the eating habits of Americans. I was preparing some remarks this afternoon, and I said, oh yeah, Food Day. We started Food Day. I think we were national honorary chairs or something that time, Rosa, you and I. Anyway, Food Day. So I looked it up. Today is National Food Day, October 24th. Thank you, Mike. However, I got to tell you, I looked up National Food Day, October 24th. Right underneath it, it's also National Bologna Day. You get so far, then you find out there's still something at your heels, right? Not the kind of bologna that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth, but the kind of bologna that if you ever saw what went into it, you'd never eat it. That kind of bologna. Anyway, CSPI was always there to prod and advise and support efforts of Congresswoman Delora and me and so many others in our legislative endeavors to get the junk food out of schools, and the soft drinks out, and better lunches, more fruits and vegetables in schools. And I also just want to mention two other, I know he's had a great staff, but I have to mention two people that were just with us every step of the way, always up on the hill, giving us advice and everything, and all of our press conferences we had on junk food and school lunches and everything. And that's Margot Wooten and Carolyn DeWall. What great people. Well, they've always been friends, as I said to someone earlier, though. But Mike and Margot and Carol and other staff, even though they've been great friends, that never kept them from putting their foot in the middle of our back and pushing us all the time. Never stopped them. And I want to mention the fruit and vegetable program. I know it's been one of Mike's constant frustrations that he's talked about for years, that we just can't get Americans to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. So we started a school fresh fruit and vegetable program. They helped us on it back in 2002 in the Farm Bill. I was chairman for a brief moment of time when Jim Jeffords came over for a little bit of time. And we got that in. We started with five $5 million. And the Bush administration kept trying to mess around with it. But we kept it going because we're on appropriation. Remember, we're on appropriations committee, so we had the money. So they couldn't quite, they couldn't, that's why it was so wonderful being with Rosa, because we do these things legislatively, but then we had the pocketbook. Then we had the money on the other end, so we kept it going. And in 2008, we made it a permanent program, so it went from $5 million to $40 million. And I just looked it up, fiscal year 2017 is $201 million annually for fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's just in elementary schools, better for kids with schools that have a high proportion of free and reduced price lunches. So Mike, we haven't given up yet. We're going to get, these kids are going to grow up, they're going to have the taste sensation of eating fresh fruits and vegetables, and by God, we're going to get them to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables when they get older. So stick around a little bit longer, will you? However, just like bologna, I got to tell you, there's a bill in the, well, first the dried fruit people wanted to get in. The raisins and some of the nuts. Wanted to get in on it. We kept them out. Now there's a bill in the House by some congressman from Maine, I'm sorry, Rosa, I don't know who it is, that would take the word fresh out of the fresh fruit and vegetable program and put in the word all forms. Which means, and what he's talked about is that like those canned peaches and canned, it's full of syrup and sugar. And then they get dried fruits that are just concentrated sugar and cranberries and raisins and all that kind of stuff. And so they're still coming at it, trying to do away with that. So, Mike, we still got some work to do there too, and keep that going. But I got to tell you, if there was nothing else, that you could describe Mike Jacobson in terms of the impact he's had on America, if there was nothing else, to me, getting sugared drinks out of schools has been a monumental success in this country. I remember in the 70s and 80s going to high schools and stuff, vending machines all along the way, big Cokes and big Pepsis, Marion, and all that kind of stuff. They're gone. Imagine that, just in that short span of time, he's done that. Well, thanks to CSPI, and thank you to Mike. The Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011, giving the FDA a mandatory recall for the first time. And the menu labeling bill, which we got in the Affordable Care Act, which is going to happen one of these days. I know that the FDA was ready to come out with it this May. They put it off for another year, but it's there. They drug their feet for too long. But it is. And even some restaurants are already voluntarily putting their things on the menus and stuff. So hopefully by next year we won't have to put it off any longer, and we'll have mandatory menu labeling in all of our restaurants and fast food places and people like that. So Mike, congratulations on a brilliant and successful career. As someone who's been retired for 2.5 years, let me tell you, it's not so bad. If you don't feel like wearing a tie, by God, you don't have to. You can wear tennis shoes with dress clothes. And I know you and Donna have had a similar life, like me and Ruth, just both working, having different careers, that kind of stuff. It is so enjoyable to get up in the morning and have that second cup of coffee with your spouse and knowing that you don't have to get in that damn traffic jam and go to work. So I have one bit of advice, Mike. If you stick around this place, don't schedule anything in Washington before 10 a.m. and nothing after 2 p.m. That's it. If you do that, then you'll be all right. But it's been great working with you, and like I said, the first 46 years. There's more to hear from Mike in the future, and I look forward to working with you on a lot of these issues as we continue to nail them down. Thanks, Mike Jacobson.
to sing the national anthem because I don't know what we're doing next. I think we're supposed to be hearing from Dr. Ralph Nader, are we not? Is my leader here somewhere? Is a leader here? Jacobson, do you know what's going on? What's wrong with you? This is pathetic. Ralph's coming. Ralph is arriving.
Greetings. Unlike a corporation, I can't be in two places at once, so I'm sorry I cannot be here for this extraordinary gathering honoring Mike Jacobson and his strong team of colleagues. I first met Mike when I was recruiting students at MIT in the early 70s, and he walks into the room and I interviewed him and asked him, "Are you a long distance runner?" And he nodded, yes. Boy, was that ever an understatement. Here he is, 2017, having established a tremendous record of educating tens of millions of people on national television, through Nutrition Action, through congressional hearings about nutrition and food, about junk food, about unsafe food, about colorful programs that he established to go after, for example, fettuccine Alfredo, which he called, quote, heart attack on a plate, end quote. Mike was not only a scientist, he had cognitive power, to be sure, but he was a great communicator, even landing on a stage uninvited for a mass junk food audience, giving some national award to somebody who developed some junk whipped cream, and he berated them before he was dragged away. Mike Jacobson and the Center for Science and Public Interest actually changed nutritional habits for at least 40 million people in this country over the years. And many more were exposed to how great nutritious, safe food could be for their health, including school lunches having better menus, including banning food additives, including labeling on food products so they're alert, including calorie counts on restaurant menus. The impact has been really quite sensational, and it's a lesson to our democracy, which is a very small number of people reflecting growing public opinion that they educate can change things against powerful food conglomerates and their allies in Congress.
All right, the Ralph has spoken. The very essence of the consumer movement in our country. I'm proud to be an associate and follower of Ralph Nader. But the final word tonight belongs to the good doctor of good food. And to give Michael a proper introduction, we have his longtime associate and dear friend, former board member of CSPI, a fabulous researcher and author. She puts recipes in her books. Consider that a clue. A fiery spokeswoman who counters the advertising claims and outright lies, the spurious research studies and general bullshit of the food conglomerates. Dr. Marion Nestle is the inimitable professor of nutrition, food studies, and public health at New York University. Bring up Marion Nestle.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It is wonderful to be here and an absolute honor to be in the position of introducing Mike Jacobson. I'm just thrilled to be doing it. I guess I was asked to do it because my career parallels Mike's, and I first heard of him in the early 1970s when I was assigned a nutrition course. I was teaching in the biology department at Brandeis University, and I was handed a nutrition course to teach. I didn't know what I was going to talk about, but I found a copy of Food for People, Not for Profit, the extraordinary book that CSPI had put out in the early 1970s. I used it as a textbook for my first class. I looked at it last week, Mike. It could have been written yesterday. The issues that were discussed in those book are exactly the issues we're still grappling with in our looking at the food supply from agriculture to public health. It was all covered there. It framed my first course in nutrition, and it framed the way I've thought about nutrition ever since. I didn't meet Mike until a few years later when he came out to a conference that was run at the University of California, San Francisco, where I was then teaching. And Mike was there with Bonnie Liebman, who's still at CSPI. Bonnie was, yay! Bonnie was wearing a broccoli costume. And Mike's speech to the medical students and to the medical faculty were, don't let any of these people graduate until they know what their serum cholesterol level is and are doing something about it. One other incident, and that was when I came to Washington in 1986 to edit the Surgeon General's report on nutrition and health. I was over my head and I knew it. I happened to be living in an apartment in the same building as Mike Jacobson. And I would come back from work every day with the piles of papers and take them up to Mike. It was like being in a college dormitory. It was wonderful. And he would tell me and interpret the papers for me, explain what I needed to do, tell me where the bodies were buried. I could never have gotten that job done without him. And even today, he's an extraordinary influence and inspiration for all of the work that I do. Every time I think I've really come across something that I've discovered, I do the research on it and discover that he was there first, always. So let me introduce to you and give you the one, the only, the indomitable, the inspirational, the impactful, the influential permanent chief of the food police, Michael Jacobson.
Marion, you remind me of being at Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus when they introduced the Elephant Act. The greatest, the biggest behemoths on the planet Earth. But thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Tom, Dick, and Mary, thank you very much. And Michael, who I think is gone, Walter, who had to go, Rosa, and of course, Jim Hightower, for your very generous, overly generous remarks. CSPI could not have achieved what we have without the help of people like you, inside and outside of government. And Ralph Nader had to give a speech in Cleveland tonight, but I especially wanted to thank him, because if it were not for him, I never would have become a consumer advocate, and you wouldn't be eating these delicious nibbles tonight. Ralph gave me the opportunity, of course, as a cost-free volunteer, which is a specialty of his, to work in Washington. And he's long been a great source of inspiration. I want to acknowledge my two fellow scientists whom I met as interns with Ralph. Jim Sullivan, who I think is here tonight. Jim, could you stand up? Wherever he went. Who's here tonight, and Al Fritsch, who is not. The three of us created CSPI in 1971. It was Jim, Al, and I who, the three of us, was CSPI. We clipped newspapers, read the Federal Register, and peddled, and in those pre-fax machine days, bicycled around D.C., distributing press releases to the Post, the Star, AP, and all the other news outlets. I'd like to see our communications department do that now. There are many other people I'd like to thank for playing a key role in my life or CSPI's existence, but I'm reluctant to mention the names of so many people, especially staffers, out of fear that other equally deserving staffers would feel left out. So let me generally applaud the underappreciated people who have managed our mailroom, CSPI's talented program directors, and the unsung staffers who've overseen the business side of CSPI, and who've also they've also organized this really fabulous event. So Jane, Hannah, Rebecca, Jordan, and our healthy chef, Kate Sherwood, of course, who helped with the meal. Okay, so I've named a few people. I got to name a few more people, again, out of fear that I'm going to offend somebody, but nevertheless, I think of the people who really have the longtime staffers who've made such a difference at CSPI. Bonnie Liebman and Stephen Schmidt. They've been in charge of getting hundreds of sterling issues of Nutrition Action to the printer on time and typo-free. And then Greg Jaffe has overseen CSPI's work on the controversial issue of agricultural biotechnology, where CSPI's position is very different from the ardent critics and the ardent defenders. Marga Wu-Tan has gotten junk foods out of and healthier foods into schools, improvements in the quality of foods marketed to kids, and menu labeling at restaurants. Jeff Cronin and Jane Welna, they've worked on the communications and fundraising fronts. And Tom and Rose have already mentioned some, but former longtime staffers, including Caroline Smith DeWall, Bruce Silverglade, and Dennis Bass, who made huge contributions to CSPI's work over the years. And speaking of thanks, my entire staff is probably thankful that their in-house grammar and punctuation fanatic has stepped down. But I hope that my successor dashes their glee by continuing my demand for the consistent use of Oxford commas. Let's hear it for Oxford commas! And for enforcing the proper use of hyphens, N-dashes, and M-dashes. And if any of you need a refresher, we'll have something at 9:30 p.m. tonight. And some final thanks. First, to my 4 siblings and other relatives for coming to tonight's celebration from New York, LA, Denver, Chicago, and elsewhere. And of course, my wife, Donna Lenhoff, is here. She's the real higher achiever in our family because she was the chief lobbyist for the federal 1993 Family and Medical Leave Act. And second, because money is the lubricant that keeps nonprofits running smoothly, I want to thank the people who've kept CSPI thriving over the years. Nutrition Action subscribers, and there have been millions of them, philanthropic foundations, and our generous individual donors. As some of you know, it was just by chance that I ended up working on food issues because when I came to Washington, I had no interest in the topic other than eating. But one of Nader's lieutenants had just published a book about the FDA, so Ralph suggested I write a book about food additives regulated by the FDA. Never mind that I knew absolutely nothing about food additives or about writing a book. But I plunged in and I wrote Eater's Digest, the consumer's fact book of food additives. And my basic finding was that most food additives were safe, while a few posed significant risks. But my larger conclusion was that additives did not have nearly the impact on the public's health as the foods in which they were used: fatty hot dogs, sugar drinks, and nutritionally bankrupt snack foods. Start with Hostess Twinkies if you want. So in 1973, I wrote another book, Nutrition Scoreboard, that focused on the empty calories, saturated fat, and sugar in foods. The book came out just when people had started hungering for information about what they were eating. That was 73, and a year later we started publishing Nutrition Action Health Letter, which for the past 40-some years has been CSPI's main way of educating the public and funding the organization. Now, much of my life has focused on what might seem like the index of a chemistry textbook: acrylamide, mycoprotein, the infamous olestra that Walter Willett talked about, artificial food dyes, sodium nitrite, sulfites, go down the list. Each of those has a story almost as interesting as Gettysburg, Bull Run, and Antietam. And unfortunately, I can't give you the full story of each of those substances tonight. I've always found food additives fascinating, not only because of their potential risks, but because they can serve as probes into how the government reacts when an additive previously anointed as safe turns out to pose risks. Usually, and unfortunately, America's food watchdog, the Food and Drug Administration, responds with lethargy, silence, and inaction. And that reminds me of my timid miniature schnauzer, Trixie, who cowered silently under a table when anybody came into our house. We probably should have named her FDA instead of Trixie. Or maybe I should have campaigned to change the name FDA to Trixie. But most of my and CSPI's work has focused on nutrition because of the extraordinary impact that diet has on our health, for better or worse. Diets loaded with saturated and trans fats, refined sugars and salts, and deficient in whole grains, fruits, and vegetables have been causing several 100,000 deaths every year. And that's really the heart of why we're working on food issues. Other staff members and I have beat our heads against many walls to try to get bans, limits, warnings, or other measures to improve the food supply and people's diets. I think that my head is permanently dented due to the decades-long battles on several fronts. But the headbanging sometimes paid off. We've had great success in obtaining nutrition facts labels and menu labeling, stopping the adulteration of baby foods, and greatly improving school foods, getting allergen labeling, getting organic labeling, getting the warning notice on alcoholic beverages. But three of the areas in which I've been deeply involved, and I think will have the greatest impact on the public's health, pertain to fat, sugar, and salt. I'm very proud that we've contributed to the virtual elimination of trans fat from the food supply. That by itself is saving thousands and thousands of lives every year. And when we grew up, I dare say that soda pop was just a standard part of our diet. It's what we drank when we were having a hot dog or a hamburger, when we went to a fast food joint. But since we began our campaign with the 1998 publication of Liquid Candy, per capita consumption of carbonated sugar drinks has declined by 25%. Sugar consumption has declined by about 15%. And as I think Walter mentioned, that is likely contributing to declines in diabetes and other health problems. Obesity is a tougher nut to crack. We haven't been able to have much of a dent there. And we've been working the longest on one of the most challenging but most important dietary problems, lowering sodium intake. High sodium diets are causing as many as 100,000 deaths every year. These are preventable deaths. We first focused on salt in 1977 when our young nutritionist, Bonnie Liebman, joined CSPI. She didn't know what she was getting herself into, now 40 years later. We started with petitions to Trixie, the FDA, to obtain limits on sodium, and went on to write a book, file 2 lawsuits, get a congressional hearing, and with help from Senator Harkin and Representative DeLauro, get funding for a National Academy of Sciences report that called for sodium limits. Perhaps fearing government regulation, which has not yet come, Mars, McDonald's, Frito-Lay, and many other companies have started reducing sodium levels. And those modest changes have begun chipping away at the huge death toll. But driving down sodium levels needs to be a very high priority. Now, all these activities involved a whole lot of hard work. But I wouldn't have done that work if I weren't having a whole lot of fun along the way. So I think of some of the things. Ralph mentioned in the video our 1970s era junk food award. And it was a beat-up old garbage can that we would haul to the annual convention of the Institute of Food Technologists. And we'd hold a press conference in the convention hall or out of the convention hall. And the first time it was in the convention hall. And I and the garbage can were literally dragged off the stage. So that was a fun time, I got to tell you. When Olestra-containing potato chips were being test marketed in Columbus, Ohio, we ran TV commercials and flew a big banner over the Ohio State-Penn State football game, 100,000 people in attendance, encouraging people to call us if the chips made them sick. 1-888-OLESTRA. And we got calls. Our National Food Day celebrations in the 1970s drew enormous attention to food issues and were capped with a concert in Central Park with Pete Seeger, and then a buffet dinner in the White House. Unfortunately, Jimmy Carter couldn't attend because of pressure from the cattlemen. And then just after that, in 1977, we called on the FTC to stop the advertising of sugary junk foods to kids. And to the petition, we attached a bag filled with 170 extracted, decayed children's teeth that, I tell you, gave the secretary at the FTC the willies. So it's been a lot of headaches, a lot of fun, and some real successes. I think the larger story is really an American story. 3 nobodies with no money and no connections were able to create a highly respected organization that has had a major impact on government policies, corporate practices, and the public's health. Thank you very much. You better sit down before I get a big head here. Thank you. So over the years, CSPI has improved the American food supply in so many ways. But as a favor to my successor, we decided to leave plenty of work for CSPI 2.0. For starters, we need to block the president and this crazy Congress from rolling back the progress. And then there will be new initiatives to save the multitude of lives every year due to a poor diet. Fortunately, I have a great successor, Peter Lurie, to take up the cudgels. Peter's resume is certainly a lot more impressive than mine was when I started at CSPI. He's a physician and has a master's degree in public health. He was on the faculty for several years at the University of California at San Francisco Medical School. He spent 10 years as a consumer activist with Public Citizen. And then in the last 8 years in the Obama administration, at the Food and Drug Administration, he rose to the position of an associate commissioner. But beyond his resume, as I've gotten to see him smoothly take over the helm at CSPI, I've been deeply impressed by his smarts as he's come up to speed on nutrition and food safety. And with his broad background, I'm hoping that Peter will not only strengthen our current work on food safety and nutrition, but also get CSPI into entirely new issues and reach new heights in the years ahead. Please welcome Peter Lurie.
Oi. Mike, thank you for the gracious introduction. As I walked around this evening, almost everybody said the exact same thing to me. You have huge shoes to fill. Same phrase, everybody. But it's true. And after listening to everybody tonight, listening to the recitation of these incredible accomplishments, they seem even bigger than when I first took them on. Mike, you're a scientist. I took out my phone a moment ago to confirm the accuracy of this quote, but it was Isaac Newton who said that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And that is the start that I have when I take over this organization from you. I'm determined to not let you down. I watch the faith that people in this room have put in Mike. I think about how he's fulfilled that faith over and over again. I see how much is expected of me, and I promise to do my very best to fulfill those expectations. Now, Mike has touched on this, but one reason things have gone, pretty well the first couple of weeks is the generosity and the graciousness of the staff that I've inherited from Mike. They've just been so incredibly helpful. They've shown me the bathroom. They've shown me how to get around the office. If any of you have ever been there, it's like totally impossible. But if somebody can tell me where they keep the sugar so I can put it in my tea, that would be really helpful. So let's take a moment to recognize the architects of this evening's event. Everybody at CSPI toiled over this, but I think Mike's touched on this. But Jane Wellner, Laura McCleary, Rebecca Bailey, Hannah Dahlman, Jim O'Hara, Jeff Cronin, Maya Katz, Ariana Stone, Caitlin Dow, Deborah Brink, Stephen Schmidt. But let's do this a different way. Why don't we have everybody currently working at CSPI stand up and take a well-deserved round of applause. And while we're at it, one of the things that's been so striking about being at CSPI is how many people have been around for so long, and how many people in this room are, proud to be alumni of CSPI. There's just so many of them who've gone on to do such remarkable things even after they left CSPI. So let's have everybody who is an alumnus of CSPI, please stand, and a round of applause for them as well, please. Quite a crew. So someone says, well, why would you join CSPI and why would you want to work there? I said, well, it's quite simple. You just look at the name. If you're a geek like me, you see science, you see public interest. What more would you want than that? Reasons enough to come to work for the organization. And so My entire career in academics, advocacy, and ultimately working for Trixie was informed by a single objective, which is the harnessing of the best available information, science, to drive the policies of greatest benefit to the public health. Never before have facts been more important. We are confronted, after all, by an administration that believes itself to be in possession of alternative ones. But we have seen non-scientists nominated for positions when the statute requires those positions to be filled by scientists. We've seen delays in the nutrition facts panel. We have seen delays in menu labeling requirements, and we're expecting an announcement weakening nutrition standards in school foods one of these days. But CSPI has confronted these destructive efforts at every turn, be they in the courts, be they in the regulatory agencies, or in the press. Let me be clear. I am as committed to Mike as Mike has been to the goals of this nearly 50-year-old organization. So let me tell you what we're going to do. Together, we will continue to push forward with a bold vision based in science that asks companies and the government to ensure a safer, healthier, and more nourishing food system. We will challenge institutions like schools and government programs to deliver more nutritional choices for children and families that they serve. We will work to transform the food environment so that making the healthier choice is the easier one, not the more difficult one. We will ensure that all foods are labeled with essential information so that consumers can make informed choices in a confusing marketplace. We will grapple with the meaning of environmental changes, antibiotic resistance, and try to harness emerging media technologies to amplify our message. And we will link arms with organizations that serve low-income communities and communities of color to ensure that a healthier food system serves the needs of all consumers. That is what I pledge to do. That is what I will do my best to do. Thank you for this opportunity to lead such an organization with such an impeccable and impressive track record. I look forward to working with all of you as we strive to make CSPI's next 46 years as remarkable as the last 46. By the way, the board has explained to me that one of my key responsibilities is going to be fundraising. So let me just take a crack at it. If you haven't done so already, I invite you to make a significant gift. How's that? To the Founders Fund to extend Mike's legacy. You can take a donation at the registration table, or you can fill out the pledge card as well. So, thank you very much again. I'm honored, I'm humbled. I am even more impressed by this organization than when I started this evening. It has been an even greater pleasure to work with Mike in this transition period than I had expected. He has been gracious, he has been helpful, he has been informative. It's just been a complete pleasure. Thank you, Mike. All right, enough of me. And now a little bit of Lisa Heinzeling, our board chair. Yes, she is.
Don't worry, I don't have a speech. I just want to say thank you for being here. It's wonderful to see all of you. Thank you, Mike, for all you've done over the years. It's amazing. You deserve a retirement. Enjoy yourself. Peter, thank you. It's wonderful that you're here. We're very excited to have you here. I know I speak for the entire board when I say that. To wrap up our program, we're going to hear from two members of the staff. And we've heard a little bit about the staff, but the staff is a national treasure. It's an amazing and wonderful staff. And we're just going to hear from two people who together bring 65 years of experience and wisdom to nutrition advocacy. They are going to present gifts tonight. Dr. Margot Wu Tan started at CSPI as a fellow, straight out of graduate school. She quickly built a reputation for persistence and success. She's recently been named CSPI's Vice President for Nutrition. Joining Margot here is Bonnie Liebman. Many of you know her personally. You also know her byline from Nutrition Action Health Letter. She's one of the nation's top authorities on nutrition, and she helps keep CSPI on the cutting edge of nutrition science and keeps companies honest. So thank you, Margot and Bonnie, for participating in tonight.
I just want to take 45 seconds to say that.
Stand together.
Okay. Yes. In 1977, when I first arrived at CSPI, I had a degree in nutrition, but I had an enormous amount to learn, and most of it I learned from Mike. How to write a petition, how to write a press release, how to speak in sound bites for radio and TV, how to deal with conflicting studies. Basically, you'd try to find the best and ignore the rest. But most of all, I learned how to take a stand to protect the public's health, even if it meant criticizing the powers that be. When CSPI was accused of being biased, Mike used to say, yes, we're biased. We're biased in favor of protecting the public. So I would just like to say, on behalf of all of us, thank you, Mike, for your 46 years of leadership and vision.
So on behalf of CSPI staff, I want to thank all of you for being here with us tonight. It's so heartwarming. It feels, I don't like high school reunion or, walking back through time to have so many friends and colleagues and terrific supporters of CSPI, and mostly tonight, fans of Mike Jacobson. Mike has helped to create this amazing organization that I have been honored to work for the last 25 years, and I think all of us as staff are so happy that you started this organization. It is just, that's done such great work and given us such an amazing platform to work from. So tonight, Mike, we'd like you to come up and we'd like to thank you for that.
Am I supposed to take the box on the red line?
So Bonnie will do the...
In 40 years, we've never put Mike on the cover of Nutrition Action, so we decided that it was about time to do that.
Is this for real?
Yes.
Whoa.
Oh, no, it's
no. Don't expect this in your mailbox?
So maybe we can set that down there. Not surprisingly, not everybody is sad to see Mike stepping down. That there are some in the food industry who are celebrating this evening of Mike slowing down just a little bit. So here we have the front of Food and Drink Weekly for you. I'll hand that to you, which reports on the food and restaurant industry celebrating the news with pork belly nacho cheeseburgers, a revival of Olestra fried chips, and 48-ounce sodas for preschoolers. I'll show you the other one. So the next gift comes from many of you here in the audience and folks who couldn't be with us. Hundreds of people have sent notes over the past few weeks, Mike, thanking you for what you've done. And some of them are compiled here in this book, and you'll see some up by the registration table, but I'm going to read just one that's in here now. Michael, I have admired you and your mission for 40 yikes, years that I have known you. You are the standard for how to be healthy. From Kay Kendall. Many thank yous in there.
We've got this very well organized. Anybody who knows Mike knows that he's a huge Cubs fan. But what you might not know is that many of us are also Cubs fans because Mike rarely misses a Cubs game, and that's the only time we know we won't be getting an email from him. So tonight, we would like to present to you these 2 seats from Wrigley Field.
Is that the best one so far? So we have one last gift for you, Mike. Industry hacks have mocked CSPI and our advocacy, calling us the food police. And though we think food detectives is probably more accurate, tonight we are embracing this and presenting you with an official badge. Put it on?
Sure. Oh, it's awfully thick. It might ruin my suit
Okay,
jacket.
we'll just hold on to it. All right. And so we also have one for Peter. If you can come up. And Mike, if you could deputize Peter into the food police.
Well, I've never done this before. Do I dub you? Dub you Deputy Chief of the Food Police. May you grow into the chief at some point. Does it say deputy?
I think we might be married at this point.
That's wonderful.
All right, and then, so then our last gift is for all of you. So you'll see on your tables, Mike is always encouraging people to cook from at home. And so this gives you a new fun toy to use and a wonderful recipe from our healthy chef, Kate Sherwood, from her upcoming new cookbook. So just a little something to thank all of you for being with us here tonight.
Make sure it doesn't have red lights on it.
They're all salad dressing recipes. So, thank you. That's it.
Is that it? People are free?
So I think, where's Jim? Jim, are you wrapping it up? Closing it up? All right, so that's it.
Let me just thank everybody. This has been such a wonderful evening. I so appreciate everybody's coming. I so appreciate the comments from Jim and Marion and Tom, Mary, any of the other speakers who are still here. It's been a privilege for me to be the leader of CSPI for so many years. I'm sure CSPI will do well in the future with your help, of course. So thank you for coming, and have a good rest of your evening.